Good afternoon, Ms. Kinsey.
Good afternoon. I'll wait a few more moments for everyone to connect here. All right, I think we are ready to go. So I'll go ahead and get started. It is November 15th, 2023. I'm Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. It's about 3 o'clock on the 15th. This is what I'm calling, for lack of a better term, a status conference on the pending petition for change by the City of Solvang of Water Rate Permit 15878, which authorizes diversions of water from the Santa Ynez River in Santa Barbara County. We began this hearing on November 6th and continued on November 8th and 9th, and we will hold additional hearing days in accordance with the most recent notice of additional hearing days issued by my office. This status conference is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. The audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of the recording and the Zoom-generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. Just a note, we are trying out a new Zoom transcription plugin app, whatever it might be called, so it may look a little different. I'm not quite sure. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time you're experiencing technical difficulties, please email us. Assisting me today are the usual staff of the Administrative Hearings Office. We have Nicole Mullen, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Wooldridge on the line with us. I would like to go ahead and take appearances very quickly before we get to the substance. So I will start with that, and I will start with the City of Solvang.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Chelsea O'Sullivan appearing on behalf of the City of Solvang from Richards, Watson, and Gershon. And I have my colleague, Mr. Kim, here as well.
Thank you.
Officer Kinsey.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District, the parent district.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kinsey. This is Brett Stroud of Young Wooldridge for the parent district.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Stroud. And then I have the Santa Ynez River Water Conservation District ID number 1.
Yes. Hello, Elizabeth Esposito with the Brownstein firm on behalf of ID number 1.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Alisal Guest Ranch. Kachuma Conservation Release Board.
Sam Bivens, Downey Brand for CCRB.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Bivens.
Yeah.
National Marine Fisheries Service.
Lori Beal, NOAA Office of General Counsel for the National Marine Fisheries Service.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Ms. Beal. California Trout, I believe Ms. Hall said she couldn't make this, and I do not see her on the line here. And finally, California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good afternoon, Lena Germanario appearing on behalf of CDFW.
And Stephen Puccini also appearing on behalf of CDFW today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Is there anyone else on the call who plans to participate who hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves? I don't think I see anyone. All right. The purpose of this status conference, which I identified in the notice of status conference, where we left things when we were last together for our hearing last week, Mr. Demuha did not provide his testimony because there were corrections to his testimony. CDFW has submitted corrected testimony. I've had a chance to look at it, and hopefully all of you have. And so I think the questions for us today are when we should schedule Mr. Demuha to provide an oral summary of his written testimony and be available for cross-examination by the other parties. I won't hold you in suspense. I'm looking at December 4th. That seems like the right day. We can talk about that. And then the second question is whether and in what manner to allow the City of Solvang and any other parties the opportunity to submit testimony or other evidence in response to specifically to the revisions to Mr. Demuha's testimony. And as I understand, In particular, we're looking at Mr. Nicely's rebuttal testimony, which directly responds to Mr. Demuha's testimony and possibly needs to either be revised or updated. What I was thinking for that is that we would set a date. I had looked at November 27th as a date for Mr. Nicely to submit, whether it's amended rebuttal testimony or whether it's additional rebuttal testimony, or we can call it surrebuttal testimony. It doesn't matter to me, but that would be the idea. And then we could hear from both Mr. Demuha on December 4th, and then Mr. Nicely also on December 4th. So that is what I was looking at. I want to stay within the subject matter of what we identified in the status conference today because Ms. Hall isn't with us. On the other hand, it does look to me like we're not going to need the 29th and, well, we're not going to have anything productive to do on the 29th and 30th. And so I should probably take those off the calendars and release those so you can all have your days back. But I do intend to keep December 6th and 7th and still hold those in case there's something productive we can do. So with all of that out on the table, I think what makes sense is for me to go around the room and just see if what all of you may have to add or comment on or questions you may have about these two issues related to Mr. Demuha's revised testimony. So I will look first to the city of Solvang, Ms. O'Sullivan or Mr. Kim. Do you think it makes sense to hear from Mr. Demuha on the 4th? And also, how do you intend to respond to the changes to Mr. Demuha's testimony?
I can help address that, Ms. Kinsey. As far as how we were planning to respond, our suggestion would be to allow Mr. Nicely to provide we were going to call it surrebuttal, but essentially a supplement to his direct testimony to respond to the revised Demuha testimony, because if this had been the original submission, his rebuttal would have been a bit different. There's certainly things that are still applicable, but we do need to respond to the revised analysis because in our position, it makes still is problematic, but maybe for different reasons. So we would suggest a targeted surrebuttal in response to Demuha. Rada, as far as your proposed timing, we certainly defer to you. We had been prepared to suggest that, notwithstanding the conference that's happening on the 29th and the 30th, that perhaps it would make sense to have certainly Mr. Demuha needs to go before Mr. Nicely. And so we had, been talking about potentially suggesting Mr. Demuha going on the 29th. However, we know that is a conflict for some. So I totally defer to you on the timing, but agree with you that Demuha should go before Mr. Nicely. And certainly the city's witnesses are prepared and will be, we've been prepping them to be ready on the 29th and the 30th. So from our perspective, that's still an option.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then, go ahead. Sorry.
Keep going, please.
I hesitate to bring this up because I know we have kind of narrow confines on our purpose today, but I just wanted to also put forth that, some of our evidentiary objections on the rebuttal testimony for Mr. Custis, we were objecting to it not being proper rebuttal testimony because it brought up new analysis that was not directly responsive to a prior witness's analysis. And I know you're still working on your rulings, and I don't mean to get ahead of that at all, but to the extent that you are considering not sustaining those objections and not excluding that testimony on those bases, that we would like an opportunity to respond to that new analysis, and wrapping that up with the response to Mr. Demuha's revised testimony might be an efficient use of time. So I realize that with the confines we have today and that with Ms. Hall not being here, you might not be prepared to answer that at this time, but wanted to put that forth as well.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. I appreciate that because it flags it's something we need to talk about. And that may be a basis for us. Actually, one thing I had considered was whether we convene on either the 29th or 30th for a conference like this. and
mhm.
hopefully would have limited interference with those of you who are attending the conference. You can appear by phone, however is appropriate, and we could have a chance to maybe address those. I'm not sure, but that's helpful. Thank you on with respect to that. I realize that brings up. Let's set aside the request. What I'm understanding is will be a request by Solvang to submit rebuttal in response if Mr. Custis's testimony is not excluded. Setting that aside with respect to the response to Mr. Demuha's revised testimony, is there any objection with November 27th end of day for a deadline for submission if we're going to hear from Mr. Demuha on December 4th?
That works for the city's purposes, Ms.
Okay.
Kinsey.
No objection from CCRB.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe while we're on, while I have you, Mr. Bivens, do you have any other comments on anything that we've raised so far?
No, I'm grateful that the hearing officer is looking to do this on December 4th and not the 28th and the 29th. That's certainly good for my schedule. So
Okay,
to the extent my schedule matters, I appreciate it.
great. No, that's helpful. Thank you. With that, I think I'll just go around the room. And fisheries entities, I'll get to you maybe at the end. But Mr. Stroud, does the parent district have any comments on what we've discussed so far?
Not many. I'm also grateful you're thinking of taking off the Aqua days. If you did still need to use them, I would have more thoughts about that, but it sounds like it's not going to be necessary. I'm fine with the other days you talked about. As far as the Demuha testimony, I don't think we intend to do anything specific. So I think that satisfies us.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Esposito, do you have any comments on behalf of ID number 1?
No comments or concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then I will turn maybe first to CDFW, Ms. Germanario or Mr. Piccini. Do you have comments or thoughts on this approach so far?
I have one question and one comment. So as far as Mr. Nicely's rebuttal, would there be an opportunity for evidentiary objections on that?
Yeah, with respect, yes. I guess it would all be new. So yes, there would be. I don't think we'd do it. You could submit it in. We would have time before the 13th for you to submit something in writing. So we could set, if we're going to put November 27th as the date for that submission, then I'd be inclined to do, let's see. Do you want to submit something in writing, or would an oral objection be sufficient? I guess that's the first question.
Without seeing the filing, it's hard to say. I think
Right.
I'd prefer an opportunity in writing, if that's acceptable.
And how quickly could you turn around from November 27th? I mean, what I'm thinking is I could address the objections on the last day, December 13th, if you're going to be able to submit something in writing, then I'd allow others the opportunity to respond in writing. So I just want to build in that into the time schedule.
I would say our preference would be at least 1 week for that. Guess that puts it into the 4th, December 4th.
Which doesn't give me, yes, and then that limit, well, can we do, November 27th is a Monday. I'd be inclined to do end of day on Friday.
That
It
works.
should be
Thank
very
you.
limited. I mean, it's
Sure.
only in response to what has changed. And so I that's what I look at that Friday, whatever that is. Is that the 1st?
Yeah,
That's-
thank you.
Yeah.
That works.
And then in response, if the city wanted to submit something in response, which I expect you are not required to, but I expect you might. I'd put that on December 6th. Does that? Ms. O'Sullivan or Mr. Kim, I know more time is better, but is that something that's doable? What I'm
Given
thinking is
the,
then I would have time to read it before we gather on the 13th.
yes, given what we're anticipating will be the scope of this rebuttal, I think that's adequate time.
Should be pretty limited. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Germanario. I think I will schedule out those deadlines when I issue whatever ruling will come out of this conversation today. Are there other things that you'd like to raise on?
Thank you. Just one more thing, just to flag that I believe Mr. Demuha is available on December 4th, but some of our other witnesses for rebuttal have some limits in terms of the remaining days. Mr. Evans isn't available on the 4th, 6th, or 7th, and then I believe Mr. Sin is not available on the 13th. So just wanted you to be aware of that for reference.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. I'm thinking about this but we'll move through. So if I will turn now to Ms. Beal. Do you have any thoughts or comments on behalf of NIMS?
Thank you. I do have sort of a request, but it's to accommodate myself personally because of a family matter. So I can, definitely have someone cover if we're not able to do this. But I kind of developed a conflict, and my preference would be if Mr. Bush could proceed on the 13th versus the 4th. But again, I know it's late in the game, and I will totally handle it however it works out best for you and the parties.
I've been trying to be accommodating. I'm sure that the problem is I don't see how we can do that given. I'm sorry, Mr. Bush. Just let me pause again. Mr. Bush is your witness.
Yes, for his rebuttal.
Good.
But
right.
Again, we will manage however it works out. I do feel I do feel the last minuteness of that request. So
no. I think that we could probably do. I don't think that's not Mr. Demuha, which I thought he has to go first, but I think that we can. I think that should be possible. And here's where I am because we all want to have some idea of where we're going. Based on the what I've seen so far in the hearing, based on the rebuttal testimony that I've read and things going, it just may be that we need more time. In part, I think there are some issues related to CCRB's position that I just might want to spend more time with and might be worthwhile. So from where I'm sitting right now, I think we convene again on December 4th with the witnesses. I don't know that it makes sense. I know I'd mentioned us possibly having a status conference on the 29th, but that really doesn't give us a lot of time before, if we were to decide that Solvang could submit rebuttal testimony, that just doesn't give us time to do it anyway. So I think maybe we adjourn, we come back December 4th and start with Mr. Demuha, and then move to Solvang's witnesses and go from there. And if we need additional days or a day, we will do our best to try to find a time. It may not be in 2023. But that may just be the way it's a complicated, all of them are snowflakes here. They're all complicated, but it's a complicated matter. Ms. Beal, I see your hand is up, please.
Yeah, I do have a quick question in that regard. For the rebuttal portion, I looked through the various orders. I was not clear on time limits for cross-examination of the rebuttal witnesses, so that might help me understand the timing of everything.
I believe maybe someone can help me. I don't have this I believe I set limits at I thought it was 45 minutes. It was slightly less than I didn't set a strict limit. I think what I said on cross-exam for direct was in the range of an hour. Some of this testimony is new. I think now that I'm talking in circles, and I apologize, I don't think I issued a ruling on that explicitly limited cross-exam either on direct or I'm sorry, on case in chief or for rebuttal. We are narrowing down on some of these. I would think for some of the witnesses we've heard from before that may be shorter than an hour, but some of these witnesses, for example, CCRB's witnesses are new. Mr. Custis, assuming we hear from him, is new. I would think approximately an hour in the same way we did for the case in chief's testimony would be what I would expect. Mr. Puccini, I saw you're off mute. Do you have a comment?
I just wanted to clarify, everything that has been said is perfectly fine by us. Mr. DeMuha is available on the 4th. My understanding is he'll go first. Will that then, will he be followed by Mr. Nicely on rebuttal?
That's up to the city. I don't, Ms. O'Sullivan or Mr. Kim, do you know which of your witnesses you intend to present first on rebuttal?
I think it would be Mr. Nicely, because Mr. Van der Linden's rebuttal basically takes the hydrological analysis of the permit terms that Mr. Nicely does and discusses them operationally. So I think that logically makes sense to have Mr. Nicely's kind of presentation might be a nice, foundation for Mr. Van der Linden. So.
And then that therefore could still leave time for Mr. Custis on the same day of the 4th. Should we expect that or prepare for that?
I think you should be prepared for that. Yes.
Okay.
If
Thank you very
you
much.
plan to present Mr. Custis first. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that makes sense unless Mr. Bivens, do you have a preference or a thought about when in the ordering of things it makes sense for CCRB to present their rebuttal witnesses?
I think we're happy to go at any time.
Okay.
That's good for the hearing officer. It would be good to try to fix a date certain to the extent possible, just so that I don't have 2 consultants on standby for up to 3 days, but we'll go whenever you'd like us to.
Right. I'm inclined to say the 13th. I think that makes sense that we would get as far as possible on the 4th. We can talk about, and Ms. Beal, we can talk about whether it's appropriate for CDFW to continue with some of its witnesses on the 6th or 7th. I know you may not be able to participate, but given that it's CDFW, and if anything came up, you would have an opportunity to watch the recording, and if anything came up, we could address it on the 13th.
Yes,
okay.
That would be fine. And my colleague, Ms. Capdeville, would be able to also be present on those dates.
Okay. So let's, and I know we're.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kenzie. I guess I should say that I have those consultants currently holding the 4th, 6th, and 7th. So I would need to double back and confirm the 13th.
13th.
But I will.
Please confirm check the 13th. I am now aiming for the 13th.
Yes, understood.
Okay. So I guess that's to CDFW and Cal Trout, who's not here, but if it is possible, we may want to hear from your witnesses on the 6th or 7th. So if you would please be prepared to present possibly on the 4th and then possibly on the 6th or 7th.
But then if I may, Kyle Evans would be on the 13th based on his availability.
Yes, because he's not available. Yes, yeah, exactly. Okay. It's a puzzle. I'm giving us all a moment to digest all of this. I think I've addressed all of the issues I have. I understand there's an outstanding question of surrebuttal. I think we can address it during these hearing days. But is there anything else we need to or should address today? And I will issue a procedural ruling with the November 27th date for Mr. Nicely's, let's call it limited sir rebuttal. I think that's helpful to distinguish it from everything else. And then the December 1st and December 6th deadlines for written submission of any evidentiary objections and then responses to those. I will also do my best in the written ruling to describe what we talked about in terms of the schedule. I know there are a lot of contingencies, but I will try to write that down so we can all read it again and see if you have any questions.
My only other comment, Ms. Kinsey, would just be to have us all keep in mind that we do need to budget some time, I think, for the moving of all the exhibits into evidence and whatever discussion
We do.
with that.
And that would maybe, one of the things I thought is whether we do end up scheduling a follow-up sometime, if we run out of time, a follow-up sometime later, because we wouldn't need the witnesses to attend. It may be easier. We could get the attorneys together if we need to do that. But I do think that may take some time. And so I don't want to cut us short on those, that process. Anything else before we adjourn today?
Yeah, I just, on behalf of CFW, we do apologize again for the quote unquote late hit with Brian DeMuha's changed testimony and really appreciate yours and the party's patience in this matter. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for bringing it to our attention. I realize these things don't go the way you imagine, but what's important is we're getting the best testimony we can to help me put together the best proposed order I can for the board's consideration. So I appreciate that. All right. I will plan to take November 29th and 30th off the schedule. I will issue a procedural ruling with all of everything we talked about today. And if you have any concerns, if anything I put down does not fit with your understanding, please feel free to submit something in writing and we can try to address it. Otherwise, I will see all of you on December 4th. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.